I think we just have to keep doing what we're doing. Resistance, resistance, resistance. Fight, fight, fight to win.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Scottish Tenants News. We have here the two Seans, Sean Clerkin and Sean O'Neill, and we're going to be discussing what has been a very busy few weeks for housing struggles and also housing news. But first off, we'll maybe start with perhaps the most harrowing news of all, the news of homelessness. And I know, Sean, looking here through at the newspaper coverage, we had the article in the Daily Record about homeless people stuck in hotels.
Yes. And
we had record numbers of children in temporary accommodation. And I know you first broke that story, Sean, because you brought out the FOI, is that right?
That's correct, yes. What happened was that I put the FOI in, and that one was the last time, and I had the numbers in the article. But at that time, there was 6,456 or thereabouts, 6,500 people who were homeless living in temporary accommodation, and that was a record number. However, yesterday I did another Freedom of Information request to the council, which I'd put in a month ago, and it's come out, and it's basically for those homeless up to the 10th of January this year, and it shows quite clearly that we have 6,506 people homeless who are in temporary accommodation. 2,700 of them are children. We also have 698 people, men and women, single, stuck in hotels, bed and breakfasts. We also have the City Council, Glasgow City Council, committing thousands of breaches of the unsuitable accommodation order, to the effect that all of these people are stuck in temporary ghettos, and which are squalid, substandard, not window watertight, and essentially very, very poor conditions for these people to live in. So that's why I very much support the Wyndford Flats campaign to retain and retrofit the 600 flats, because homeless people and homeless families could be put into these flats here in the Wyndford to essentially regenerate the Wyndford community.
Well, we'll get on to that in a minute, Sean, but obviously that's harrowing news, and well done to you for bringing that to the public attention. But I wonder, what's your view, other Sean?
Well, I think it's a sign, if things don't change, it's a sign of things to come for people who are just that wee bit more comfortable right now. Mm-hmm. The situation that Glasgow's homeless and asylum seekers and that are in isn't too far away for a lot of working people just now, so it's pretty dire. The sort of conditions you're describing there, Sean, is the type of thing I would have learned about in history at school as if it was the past.
Yes.
But it's very much recurring and in many ways hasn't went away.
That's right.
So that's how there's a generation of activists who are kind of standing up against history repeating itself and further immiseration of the masses, really.
And of course, things have not been getting cheaper for people. I know there's been a lot of talk about energy bills and so on, but I'm mindful of, again, another story I think you broke, Sean.
Yes. On
housing associations putting up rents by up to 9%.
Yes, the fact is the Scottish Government are allowing housing associations and allowing housing associations in the main and some and councils that they can put their rents up by a maximum of 11%, and that is absolutely ridiculous. So it makes a joke of the rent freeze that was meant to be for all tenants in Scotland, and it's never happened for socially rented tenants because rents went up last April 2022. Rents are going up again in April 2023, and social rented tenants don't even count in that. So it means that housing associations, especially here in Glasgow, can put the rents up by anything up to 11%, and we know that Maryhill Housing Association and the Queen's Cross Housing Association have put forward proposals to put the rents up between 7 or 9%. But either figure, 7 or 9%, is a very high figure. Now, the John Wheatley Housing Group is in the middle of actually balloting all their tenants to see what rents they want. But that doesn't mean that's the rent they will get in the end, even if they vote in favour by a clear majority in favour of the lowest rent possible, which is, I think, 3.4% increase. The fact of the matter is it's only a consultation. At the end of the day, it's not genuine participation, and it means that the bosses at the John Wheatley Housing Group can impose whatever rent rise they want on their tenants.
And what about you, Sean? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the major problem with it is that it's a false consultation, or it's a false involvement that people have in it, because no matter what they opt for, the rents are going up, the living standards are going down. So the idea that these so-called social landlords are representing people and their voices, and that they have a social responsibility is clearly untrue in this context, because if they did have a social consciousness, they would understand that people can't afford that. People can't afford their rents as it is the new. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and this inevitability that it's going to go up can't go on.
What I would add to that is that these housing associations are behaving like gangsters. They're forcing, blackmailing and intimidating their tenants. They're saying to them, if you don't take the large rent increase of 7 or 9%, you won't get repairs done. You won't get these works carried out. And if you get the lower rent increase, it means that nothing will be done for you in the year ahead. And that is nothing more than blackmail and intimidation. This is against people who are very, very financially vulnerable, who are having to put their heating off, who are basically not feeding themselves so their children can be fed. These are people that are literally starving or freezing this winter, and to blackmail people like that is an absolute crime as far as I'm concerned, against human rights and humanity.
Yeah, of course that was covered by the Glasgow Evening Times and the Herald covering this story, but there's a related story about it that I think you were also involved in, Sean, where you exposed the loopholes around the eviction ban.
Oh, absolutely. The eviction ban is a joke. It's like the rent freeze. No social tenants were involved in the rent freeze. As far as the eviction ban is concerned, it means any tenant that has rent arrears of £2,250 or above, £2,250 that is, can be taken to court and evicted, and that's happening. But even worse, Shelter Scotland said very recently in a press release that they've got a whole number of cases of tenants, who are actually being evicted below that figure of 2,250. They're being evicted for rent arrears between £1,000 and £2,000. And so the idea that there's a working eviction ban is a joke. It's all a PR contract by the Scottish Government. That's what it is.
And of course, there was the Glasgow Times article about the STO successfully opposing one of these evictions by Queen's Cross Housing Association.
That's correct. That was Paul Dodwell, who we can name because he went public on it. And Paul owed £3,700. But this great community here in Maryhill, near the Wyndford and Maryhill, got together, and people got together and paid off his debt in working class solidarity, a collective of people coming together, showing again that it's the collective that works in communities, which defeats capitalist and corporate interests.
So a good news story there, but perhaps related is the rise in dampness and mould. And I know we just briefly mentioned the fact that heating bills are so expensive, but do you think these things are related? I mean, I know that you broke the story there on the dampness rising.
Yes, in the John Wheatley Housing Group, it was in the Herald. I did a freedom of information request, and I was absolutely amazed at the reply I got, because even I was shocked, and I thought I was inured to shocking things. But I discovered that the John Wheatley Housing Group doesn't count dampness or mould, doesn't know the extent of damp and mould in the 93,500 properties across Scotland, certainly doesn't know what the damp and mould is in the 40,000 properties it has in Glasgow. And what will happen is that next week there's a newspaper doing a major coverage on a tenant and their family in the city, in the south side of Glasgow, who have been exposed to mould and have been made very ill because of the mould. And the John Wheatley Housing Group have been trying to cover it up, but this will be exposed for what it is. It's made a whole family very ill, and they have serious illnesses because of the type of mould they were exposed to. And this is happening all over Scotland, where housing associations and councils have not bothered, not had a duty of care to their tenants, and have allowed them to be exposed to damp and mould, and basically placing children and elderly people at serious risk of their health and into serious ill health. And the scandal is still to hit home in the days and weeks to come.
Yeah, it shows the reckless, sort of lackey accountability that these so-called social landlords have, and the fact that working people only really have each other to rely on and to trust. Because if their homes are in the hands of the people, there's no way that we want to know exactly what's going on in our communities and be there on the front lines fighting these problems and making sure that we do have the decent homes that people like John Wheatley stood for. But unfortunately that's not there, and that's due to that detachment of these interests from the communities that they supposedly serve. They don't exist in these communities, they don't enter them, and they shouldn't represent them.
And what's worse is that you have councils and especially housing associations who have got such structures of management that they're completely disconnected from their tenants, because you've got CEOs and middle management in the Wheatley Group earning over £113,000 per annum, and a chief executive who's recently retired who was earning £418,000 per year, totally disconnected from the hard lives of tenants in communities. And the fact of the matter is, it's going to get worse this financial year 23-24, because in 2023-24 the Scottish Government's planning to cut the social homes building budget. They're going to cut it by £112.8 million, a 16% cut in building new social rented homes in Scotland. That is nothing short of a disaster, which means that all our tenants, or hundreds of thousands of tenants in Scotland, are going to be living in substandard, squalid conditions because repairs are not being carried out and new homes are not going to be built. And it's just what I would call a housing and homelessness disaster that's occurring in Scotland today.
Yeah, and I think that neatly segues in onto perhaps the meatiest chunk of this programme today. And I wonder if Sean, perhaps you can introduce it, because we've had a range of media, the Times of London, the Scottish Sun, as well as all the local newspapers, but the television as well, STV News cover it. There is a community occupation taking place in the Wyndford. Perhaps you maybe want to talk a wee bit about that.
I've even had interest for the United States and Hungary in that as well, and I think it shows that local activism does have global implications, and it relates to people across the world, really, because it's the same situation playing out again and again, where rich people get to lord over humble working people, and the types of the wealth that you're talking about there, the salaries that these executives see in a year, their tenants don't see in a lifetime.
Correct.
And then you get this narrative that Wheatley Homes is not for profit.
I mean, perhaps if you introduce to our viewers what precisely is going on, because many people, this will be the first time they're hearing about it.
Aye, so I mean that's the background of it. Obviously the wealth disparities in our city, and then obviously the occupation that's took place has been unfortunately, the state that Wheatley have got the situation into, it's not been something that the tenants, I mean, you don't want to take the risks that you need to take in these situations, but unfortunately, people now feel that they've got nothing to lose, really, because we're on the verge of destitution, and people have decided that direct action might be the thing that will get them to sit up and listen, because certainly try to go through all the democratic means hasn't resulted in us being listened to. We've had public meetings, we've had, I mean, basically the civic society in Scotland, where social conscience backs the position of save these high flats, retrofit them. So does the council's own net zero objectives. So when we're kind of standing up for that position and just getting stonewalled, you're kind of looking around going, well, it's not down to ordinary people to take matters into their own hands, and that's what they've done. And tenants have welcomed the support of allied groups across the city who see this as not just a Wyndford issue, as you've pointed out with homelessness figures, it's a Scotland-wide issue.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's not just direct action in the Wyndford, there's been direct action in the Parliament, protests, meetings. There's a meeting taking place just the day after we're filming this, backed by Commonweal, as well as obviously the Scottish Tenants Organisation. So, as you say, Civic Scotland uniting behind this bid.
Absolutely.
But Sean, Sean, you're no stranger to direct action. I wonder if you could comment on this, because obviously this city has seen many demolitions before, and we'll come on to that in a moment.
Yes. I think the significance of the Wyndford occupation is very, very important for future protests and for future collective actions in Scotland. I believe that this action, this collective action of occupation and direct action by the Wyndford residents and the Wyndford tenants and other people, other working class people coming together as a collective to stop this demolition will inspire working class communities all over Scotland to take similar actions to resist gentrification, to resist the takeover of working class communities by corporate capitalism, whereby they gentrify areas by pulling in middle class and upper class households who can pay big money, and they're kicking out local people, and working class people have to leave the community. This has to stop, and Wyndford are showing the way. This is a direct action that Wyndford and the working class cannot lose. We cannot afford to lose this. We have to inspire the rest of Scotland. We have to win this, and I believe we will win this fight.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that brings in a few blasts from the past. I'm mindful here of a recent story about Councillor Graham Campbell raising the issue of homes not being delivered after demolition, often decades on. An example he raised was the Red Road. Maybe Sean, if you want to...
Yes, I was involved in resisting the demolition of the Red Road flats. I actually got myself inside the exclusion zone. I actually stayed overnight with a family who defied the exclusion zone to try and stop the demolition. Unfortunately, the police came and removed us. However, they promised back then, 10 to 12 years ago, they promised 10 years ago that they would build brand new social rented houses in the Red Road Flats area. Not one single social rented brick has ever been planted. And where Councillor Graham Campbell lived, at 32 Pinkston Drive, not one single social rented brick has been laid in that area of Sighthill. And it's again idle promises. And when the dust settles, the GHA comes along, or now we call the John Wheatley Housing Group, will come along and say, oh, social rented homes, we don't need them. We'll just build the 300 mid-market rented homes many years from now here in the Wyndford, where it'll be costing over £1,000 a month for people to stay. And it's only aimed at professional people. It's not for local people. It's not for poor people. It's working class people being hammered again in a class war against the working class.
And I think what stands out for me with that, as a tenant in the Wyndford just now, when I hear the stories of what happened in Red Road, it's the exact same sort of managed decline that you get that then is like a pretext for taking away the homes. So you get perfectly good housing schemes run down on purpose in a number of years, and it's a really elongated process. It's designed to kind of sap the confidence of the people and make you question, you know, is this a good community? And then the media obviously reflects that back in, and we've had that in Wyndford as well, when you think you're going on to talk about a community coming together, and then you have a journalist, you know, getting your question about, is this a dodgy area, is this a criminal area, is there drugs here? And that's the sort of narrative that we're up against, unfortunately. And to get to, you know, our class enemies, they're very good at what they do, but that's because they have resources that we don't. But the one weapon that we do have against them is the fact that we are the majority of people, and it's just a matter of getting people on side and getting our message out there, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting you talk about an elongated process there, Sean, because there was an article in The Guardian today. Britain is addicted to the wrecking ball. It's trashing our heritage and planet, which obviously features the struggle in the Wyndford. But the article noted that there's been, since advent of the Scottish Parliament, over 77,000 homes demolished, the vast majority of them public housing. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I do, because like some of my earliest memories is that, like, I remember I came from Castlemilk and the Mitchell Hill flats, like I remember them being demolished, and that was where my parents grew up, and then I never really seen that replaced with adequate housing for the community there. And then again, you know, my daughter, she's grown up in a scheme in the Wyndford that if Wheatley Homes get their way, it's going to be the same thing again. It's going to be a demolition, and then uncertainty for years as the Red Road experience. But then, as well as that, and this climate crisis that we're in as well, the potential damage that could be done up here could be disastrous. And I think actually the good people of the West End would see that as well and want to stop this too, because to demolish their buildings, it'll be a social disaster, as we've documented, but it'll be an environmental disaster, and I don't think the people of Glasgow want that. I
think the what's going to happen in the Wyndford if the John Wheatley Housing Group get away with it is it's gangsterism, it's environmental vandalism, it's the demolitions would be nothing more than environmental vandalism, and that's what it amounts to. And it would be the destruction of the entire community of Wyndford. And this is the gentrification that's going on all across Glasgow at the moment. Because what we see is what's happening in Wyndford is happening in Pollokshaws on the south side, where again they're building mid-market. They want to build mid-market homes for rent. They're so gentrified. They even want to remove the John McLean Cairn Memorial to the great revolutionary, working class revolutionary John McLean. They want to remove that and hide that away from people, that people can't see it and know their history. But the other thing is that in the city centre, we've got massive poverty. But what does Glasgow City Council want to do? Well, at this point in time, it's got over 6,500 build-to-rent units in the pipeline through private developers, charging £2,700 a month for rent, where they'll have indoor cinemas, indoor gymnasiums, indoor lounges and pubs, which will only be for that community. And this is aimed at the top 20% of income earners. And where are the working class in Glasgow? Nowhere. They won't be allowed to live in the city centre. And again, gentrification. It's about gentrification all over Scotland, all over Britain. And that's what we're seeing, that's what we're witnessing, is the destruction of working class communities, and we have to stop this now in the Wyndford.
And indeed, that brings us on to an op-ed piece. It was in the Architects Journal, obviously not widely read outside of the profession, but noted high-rise demolition that turns COP26 on its head, talking about the community that's under threat and how that's part of a larger process. But that's 77,000 homes, a real kibosing affordability. And I just wondered, bringing all these things together, you know, the homelessness, the rising in the rents, the dampness, the evictions, and obviously the resistance to that. I wonder if you have maybe a closing comment.
I think it is really symptomatic of the class war that's really raging in the past few years, that's reaching a boiling point, because I think it's bigger than the Wyndford, obviously, it's bigger than just the community. Basically for me, it's a situation where they're trying to build a future, according to them, through demolishing homes, which is
Bright New Dawn, they called it the Wyndford.
And I think we've heard that just too many times at this point. I think it insults the intelligence of people in Glasgow to hear that line churned out again. And you can't build a bright future for a community through less homes and higher rents. Just like you can't have sustainable industries through less jobs and higher wages. I think it's much bigger than just the community.
Well, just on this point, there was a piece out today in the Glasgow Times from Bernadette Hewitt saying that there'd been too much reportage from opposition to their plans, and it was they needed to set the record straight. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, it shows that they're rocked, obviously, by people uniting. It shows as well that the phony consultations aren't the whole story. And I don't think maybe that they were expecting that. Do you know what I mean? They think they've got a monopoly over the popular consciousness, but in fact they don't.
Yeah. Obviously, Sean, you've been at this a while and maybe a bit of perspective on the matter, but what's your view?
I think we just have to keep doing what we're doing. Resistance, 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 fight, fight, fight to win. The Wheatley Group are obviously the back foot. This is why they're coming out now on trying to defend themselves, and it's because they're under a lot of pressure from the collective efforts in the Wyndford area and from people who are inside the Wyndford area fighting through this occupation, and it's definitely winning, and we have to win this fight, and I think we are winning it, and it shows because the Wheatley Group are trying to justify what they do, but we know what the John Wheatley Group are like, the housing group. They insult the name John Wheatley, they turn in his grave. This is the same group.
Who was John Wheatley, Sean?
Well, John Wheatley was a socialist who was in the first Labour government in 1924, and was the housing minister and was the builder of quality council houses, the first quality council houses built. But going back to the Wheatley Group themselves, back in 2014, after the Commonwealth Games was over, there was supposed to be a legacy in the East End of Glasgow for working class people and poor people, and that was that the beds, the furniture, all of that equipment was supposed to go to the poor people in Glasgow that from the village, from the Commonwealth Games village. What did the Wheatley Group do? They stuck all millions of pounds worth of furniture into two warehouses in Renfrew that essentially leaked, had rats, bird droppings, and they basically ruined millions of pounds worth of furniture for poor people in the city of Glasgow. And they lied about it, and it wasn't until an employee filmed it and showed the truth, and it shows you that the Wheatley Group don't care about working class people, don't care about their welfare. They just only care about their salaries and their positions. That's all they ever care about.
Well, from the domestic to the macroeconomic, you heard it here first. We have to fight, 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 resist, 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 and win this struggle. But we'll be seeing you again next month, covering the stories that matter for housing and tenant struggles with the Scottish Tenants Organisation, Scottish Tenants News. Thank you for tuning in today.